Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the diamond-shaped cloth. This is one of a series of card suit patterns on mooglyblog.com. We started with the heart, and now we're on the diamond. The spade and club are coming up. Let's get started. To make the diamond-shaped cloth, I used a USH 5mm crochet hook and 35 yards of Lily Sugar and Cream, which is a worsted weight cotton yarn. I also recommend having a couple of stitch markers handy. With the yarn and hook size recommended, these end up being about 9¼ inches tall and 7 inches wide, but feel free to use the yarn and matching hook of your choice. In thinner yarn, these would make beautiful coasters. In a big, thick yarn, they could make great wall decor. You can have a lot of fun with these. In this size, I like using them as trivets and table decor. So let's get started. The diamond-shaped cloth is almost certainly the easiest of the set. We start at the bottom, increase until we've got our width, and then decrease back towards the top. Finally, a round of single crochet finishes it off. Of course, traditionally, to match the card suits, it should be worked in red, and that is what I used in the original pattern, but I'm going to demonstrate it with this pretty blue because the stitches will be a little bit easier to see. So let's begin our diamond-shaped cloth. We start, of course, with row 1, and I've already put the slip knot on my hook. I'm now going to start by chaining 3. Now, if you follow some of my other patterns, you may have seen that I like to use special stitches like a chainless starting double crochet for the first double crochet of a row in a lot of my patterns. However, for this series of patterns, working a chain 3 is really almost the better option. It gives us a really nice row or stitch rather to work our edging around, so I wouldn't worry too much about overthinking this pattern. Just use the simplest stitches like here we're starting with a chain 3. Now we're going to continue by working 2 double crochets into the third chain from the hook, which of course means the very first one we made back down by the slip knot. Now I like to work into the underneath loop of that first chain, but you can work into whichever part you like. It's totally up to you. I find that when I work into that underneath loop, let me pull that up here so we can see a little easier. There we go. You can see how that just sort of bends that stitch right over and it doesn't introduce a twist to it at all. Now, I'm not going to tighten up this stitch right here with the slip knot. Normally, I would go ahead and do that, but we're going to work into that when we do our border later. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that sitting kind of open. Now, if you'd like to, this is also a great time to introduce those stitch markers. I like to put one in the first and last stitch of every row. That way I know I always end on the right spot when I come back across. Especially when we're working with this chain 3, when we want to mark the third chain there, that top one as the top of our double crochet, using a stitch marker just makes it a little bit easier to figure out where your hook's going to go when you come back for the next row. Otherwise, we are now done with row 1. Simply 3 double crochets all worked into that very first chain right there. And now we're ready to begin row 2. So to begin row 2, we're going to start again with a chain of 3. And again, we'll be working into that in the next row, so we can move that stitch marker right on up to that third chain. Make sure you don't make, especially that third chain, too tight because you will want to work back into it. So I like to chain before I turn, but point is we're going to turn either way before or after and work back across. So now we've got our chain 3 here. We're going to work 2 double crochets right into that very first stitch. So there's 1 and 2. There we go. Then we are going to skip the next stitch and work 3 double crochets into the last stitch. We're just using double crochets until we get to that border, then we'll use single crochets. So if your stitch marker is in the way, it's a little tight with that in there, you can go ahead and move that out. It's done its job for this row. We need a second and a third. There we go. And with 6 stitches total, this is what it should look like at the end of row 2. And now we're ready for row 3. We'll start again with a chain of 3. And again, I like to make that last chain just a little bit bigger. There we go. And mark that with my stitch marker. I can drop that loop right back onto my hook and turn to go back the other direction. So we're going to start very similarly, and I think you'll quickly see how this pattern comes together. We're going to put 2 more double crochets right in that first stitch. There's 1 and 2. There we go. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches here, and we're going to put 3 double crochets right between the previous stitch and the next stitch. So we skip these 2 and then work right there. So we're going to yarn over and insert our hook right between the posts of those 2 stitches. This is really similar, sort of just a different take really on the granny stitch. Sometimes with the granny stitch, you'll see a chain 1 in between sections. For these shapes we're making, it's better to skip it. I just find it makes the shapes a little neater and nicer. So if you're familiar with the granny stitch, this is probably starting to look very familiar indeed. After we've worked 3 double crochets in between those 2 posts, we then skip the next 2, and we need to work 3 double crochets right into that last stitch. Again, if that stitch marker is in the way, we can go ahead and pull that out. We now know exactly where we're going. There we go. Actually, I did lose my place there for a second. Get my hook back in there. There we go. And we just work 3 more double crochets all right into this stitch. That chain was just a little bit tight, which is why I always like to take the time when I think of it to make it a little bit bigger. There's our second one. And here is our third. There we go. And now you can see we've increased again by 3 stitches. So now at the end of row 3, you should have a total of 9 double crochets. And now we're ready for row 4. But before we begin, I want to show you a neat little trick of this pattern. We just finished row 3. 1, 2, 3. And you can see we have 3 groups of 3 in it. 1, 2, 3. As we make row 4, you'll see we have 4 groups of 3. So that's another fun way to just keep track of where you are in this pattern. So we're going to start again, of course, with a chain of 3. I'm going to make that third chain a little bit bigger now, especially when you're working with a yarn that's a little bit stiffer like Lily Sugar and Cream. It's good to make sure you take that time because this yarn doesn't have a whole lot of give to it. If you were using a yarn with more stretch, like a wool, then, you probably wouldn't have to worry about that as much. But when you're using a yarn without give to it, it can be an issue. So let's go ahead. We've got our chain 3. We've got that top one marked. We're going to put 2 right in that first stitch, 2 double crochets, of course. 1 and 2. Oop. There we go. Sometimes my depth perception gets the better of me. Then we skip the next 2, and we're going to work between that previous stitch and the next stitch and put 3 double crochets right there. There's 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Then we need to skip the next 3 and work 3 double crochets in between the previous and the next. Very familiar, right? This is our third group of 3 double crochets for this row. And because we know we're on row 4 and we've already got 3 groups done, there must be just 1 left. And of course, that's going to go into that last marked stitch right there, the top of that chain 3. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and pull that stitch marker out of the way. It really wants to be tight today. Oop, let me try that again. Get our hook in there. There we go. 1 and 2 and 3 again. So you should have a total of 12 stitches now. We've increased again by 3, and we can take a look and see what we've got. 3, 6, 9, 12 stitches here in row 4. And now we're ready for row 5, which will, of course, have 5 groups of 3 stitches. And indeed, we're going to just keep repeating row 5 through row 8. It's just increasing by 3 stitches per row. Let's go ahead and work row 5 together. We start again by chaining 3. I like to take the time to make that third chain just a little bit bigger than the rest. Put my stitch marker in there. And then turn. 2 double crochets right back in that first stitch. 1, 2. And then remember our pattern. We're on that first group, so we're only going to skip 2 now, so we can go in between this group of 3 and this group of 3. And we want to put 3 double crochets there, just to continue that pattern. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to skip 3 and work between those next two groups here. Put our hook right in there. Don't really have to count them. You can see right where you're going to go. Although if you notice there aren't 3 stitches there to skip, it's probably a good time to pull back and make sure you've got the previous row correct. There we are. Skip the next 3, work between those two groups of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Then we can just look at our work, see where we're at, pull up a little bit more yarn here if needed. What do we have next? We have that marked final stitch, so we know we're going to put 3 double crochets in that last stitch. Pull the stitch marker aside here. There we go. There's 1, 2. Should have pulled up just a little bit more yarn. There we go. And 3. So now we are on row 5, where we just finished row 5, and we should have 15 stitches. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. 5 groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're just repeating exactly what we just did there. You want 3 double crochets, your chain 3, and your 2 double crochets in the first stitch, and then we work between those groups of 3 until we get to the end and put 3 double crochets in that last stitch. So we did the exact same thing for rows 6, 7, and 8. And of course, in row 8, you'll have 8 groups of 3 for a total of 24 stitches. So once you've got your 24 stitches across at the end of row 8, then we're ready, of course, for row 9. Now, I've stopped here at row 6 for our little demo, but again, rows 6, 7, and 8 are all repeats of row 5, so row 9 should work beautifully right here as well. We're going to start with chaining 3. 1, 2, and 3. Once again, we're going to be working in there, so I want to keep using that stitch marker right in the top of that third chain. There we go. And then what we're going to do is skip the next 2 stitches right away and come over here to that space in between the previous and next stitch, and we're going to work 2 double crochets right there, just 2. 1 and 2. Then, if we go back to our instructions, it says the next thing to do is skip 3 stitches. Done. And then we begin our repeat for this row. 3 double crochets between that previous and next stitch, so right in that space, and skip 3 stitches. Very similar to what we did before. Indeed, just making some changes at the beginning and end of the row will create those decreases. So for now, when you're sort of in the interior of the pattern here, we just work those 3 double crochets between each group, just like we did before. I'm going to pull up some more yarn here. Of course, if you finish row 8, you'll have a couple more of these to do than I do here on my sample size. But we're just going to work our way across here. I'll get it over here as quick as I can. And we just want to keep working, like I say, in pattern until we get to where 3 stitches remain. Now, that can be a little confusing because our repeat, and I'm right there here on my small sample, pull up a little bit more yarn. There we go. On my sample here, when we're doing our repeat, remember our repeat is 3 double crochets in between the previous and next stitch, and then skip the next 3 stitches. So I finish these 3 stitches here, skip the next 3 stitches, and right there, so to speak, is where that repeat has landed us. So if we go back to our instructions, it now says 2 double crochet to work that until 3 stitches remain. So that's those 3 stitches right here. We work 2 double crochets in this last space right here. 1 and 2, and then simply double crochet in that very last stitch. So if you remember what we did at the beginning of the row, we've essentially mimicked that here at this end. Let me pull the stitch marker out of the way and we'll take a look together. So if we look at what we had at the beginning of the row, we have a double crochet followed by 2 double crochets in that first space. Then we go back to our pattern, 3 double crochets in each of those spaces until we get to that last one where we want to mimic what we did at the beginning. So we just have 2 right there and 1 right there. So at the end of this particular row, we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 stitches. So on your full-size one, we're just going to keep repeating this row 9 that we just did until we get down to only 9 stitches. So let's go ahead and work that row one more time together. We're going to start again by chaining 3. This is just a row 9 repeat. Oop, let me pick that up and try that again. There we go. Put our stitch marker right in the top there. and then again we'll turn. Now remember, we want to jump all the way over here. We're going to skip these next 2 stitches now and work 2 double crochets right in between. Okay? Then we're back into our pattern. So we work 3 double crochets in each of these little spots until we've got 3 stitches remaining. And remember that our repeat finishes with skipping 3 stitches. So that's why we're doing it together again here, so you can see exactly how that works. Just going to keep crocheting across with 3 in each set here. And then I'm going to stop and look right here. Look where I am in my stitches. I can see this next group has 3, but this next group only has 2. So this is where I've stopped. I've skipped these 3 for my repeat, and officially 3 stitches remain. So to finish up this row, I want to put 2 double crochets right in this space. 1, 2, and then we double crochet in that very last marked stitch there at the top of our chain 3. You can see here on my sample, again, I'm a couple rows ahead of you, but now I am down to 3, 6, 9, 12 total stitches. So I need to do this one more time so I can get down to a total of 9. So now you can see I've worked through essentially row 13 and we're down to 9 stitches, 3, 6, and 9. So now we're ready to follow the instructions for row 14. Again, we're just decreasing some more, and at this point, you can see there's only one group of 3 right there, so it's going to get just a little bit trickier. So I have written it out. So we're going to start again with our chain 3. There we go, 1, 2, and 3. Still going to be working into that top chain there. There we go. And now for this one, we skip 2 stitches, and then we're going to work 2 stitches in between, just like we started the previous row. Previous several rows, I should say. There we go. And then we go back to our instructions. We skip those 3 stitches and work 2 stitches between the previous and the next. So now just straight to 2. We've run out of places to put our groups of 3 here as we do our decreases. Let's get that on there. There we go. And then, of course, after we work those 2 double crochets right there, we put our final double crochet right in that marked stitch. So in row 14, we have gotten ourselves down to just 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now we're ready for row 15, which is the final row before our edging, and it only has 1 stitch in it, but it's got several parts. So let's sort of work it together here. We're going to start by chaining 2, and this is not going to count as a stitch. It's going to count as the first leg of our double crochet 3 together. So that's a lot to think about. Essentially, we're just going to count this here as the first section of a big decrease to come down to 1 stitch. So since that leg's already made, we really only have to work a double crochet 2 together. Again, this will just count as the post leading up towards that stitch. So now what we want to do, I've got my yarn over on my hook. I'm going to insert my hook right between these 2 groups of 2 here. Yarn over and pull up my loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. There we go. Then I am going to yarn over again and insert my hook right in that very final stitch right there. Yarn over, pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And now with 3 loops here left on my hook, I'm going to yarn over and pull through 3. And that will be the 1 official stitch in row 15. So now it's time to make our border. We're going to start with a chain 1 and turn, or turn and chain 1, however you like to do it. And then right here in that very final stitch, that 1 stitch of row 15, we want to put a single crochet, then a chain 2, and then another single crochet. Now, that chain 2 will come in handy if you decide you want to link your motifs to other motifs, but I also find that it gives me a nice good point here on our diamond. So now we're ready to start working down the sides of this rose. So I found that the best way for me was to work 2 single crochets in the side of each row as I come on down back towards my point. I find that double crochet rows with 2 single crochets or 2 stitches, whatever they are, worked into the side works out best for me. Your tension and gauge may be different. So if you find that the side of your diamond is sort of pulling together, throw in a couple of extra stitches, maybe a third one here and a third one here. If you find that the edge of your diamond is ruffling, if there's seems to be too many stitches and it's becoming ruffly along the sides, then you may want to say only put one stitch in the side of a couple of rows. Just sort of use your eyeballs and use your own project in front of you as your best guide. So now let's begin. I'm going to work 2 single crochets in the side of each row. And a lot of times when we work into the edge of a pattern, we will split the stitches. I'm going to come down here so it's a little easier to see. And we'll try and get like just 2 stitches on our hook above it. And that is the way I usually like to edge things, especially things like garments. For projects like this though, let me pull up the original and you can see I like a really nice bold border, especially with this granny stitch pattern. It really helps emphasize that granny stitch. So we're going to do the laziest and funnest way, I think, to make a border around stitches. We just go right into that space around the whole row. And this is where I love having used those chain 3s, because why put in extra work when we can just have fun and do more stitching? There's 2 single crochets in the side of that row. We jump down to the next. I'm just going to go right around that whole post. Not normally something I would do, but like I always say, there's exceptions to every rule, and it just depends on the project. And for this project, I happen to like the way it looks. If it was on a sweater, I probably wouldn't. But we're just going to work all the way back down. And of course, on the full-sized piece, we've got, I think, 7 rows to do that on until we get back down here to where, if I lay this down, you can see this is sort of our side point for our diamond. So when you get to that point, before you just go on to the next row, we're not going to do a single crochet, chain 2 single crochet. We're just going to chain 2, 1 and 2. And that will give us a little extra point as we come back down this side, or down the, where we were increasing before. So we just go back here now, find that next end stitch, and we'll work our 2 single crochets right around it. And then work our way all the way back down to that point where we began. And you'll remember I said when we first began, I did not tighten up that slip knot. This is going to allow us to work into that slip knot or into that chain space really easily. So now I've just worked my 2 stitches in each row here. Straighten that out a little bit there. We can see we've worked our way back down to that side of that first row. So we're going to put 2 single crochets right around that little chain right there. And now we are back at that chain space. Let's get that good and centered. There we go. So you can see it's right where my slip knot was. So right in that space, I'm going to do another single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, just like what we did here at the top. Now, if you'd like, you can work over that first end as you do these. Depending on how you're using them, I do recommend that you finally weave in your ends with a yarn needle, but we can take up some of that length by working over it. And there you can see there's that single crochet, chain 2 single crochet, which gives us that nice point there at the end again. So now we just want to do the same thing as we work our way up. 2 single crochets in the side of every row. And of course, once we get to that side sort of pointy section there, we'll chain 2 again to give us that nice point along the side. So I'm going to keep working my way up, and I'll see you as we finish up the edging. So now you can see I've worked all the way up this second side, and I just put that little chain 2 at that side corner if you want to call it a corner, the side sticky outy bit, and that gives us a really nice turn. And you can see how that chain 1, that single crochet, chain 2, single crochet at the bottom mimics what we have up here at the top. So at the end, what I like to do is actually use a seamless join to finish this off. So rather than joining with a slip stitch, I'm going to go ahead and cut my 4-inch tail here and set that aside. Then I'm just going to pull up on that end and set aside my hook somewhere where it's not going to try and roll away on me. Then I'm going to grab my yarn needle and use that to finish up this last end. Find this just gives it a really nice finished look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yarn needle. I'm going to look for that first single crochet right there. I'm going to go just under those top 2 loops with my yarn needle, bring it around, and then I'm going to send my yarn needle right back into the center between the front and back loops of the stitch it came out of. And if I pull that back through, and you can see I can make that look just like the top of any of other stitches there. And it just gives it a really nice finished look without a jog. I do recommend a little bit of blocking for these, especially in cotton yarn. you just get it wet and sort of reshape it and let it dry, you can see you end up with some really beautiful edges for your diamond-shaped cloth. And that's how to crochet the diamond-shaped cloth. Be sure to go to Moogly to get the matching patterns for the rest of the card suit pattern set, the heart, spade, and club-shaped cloths. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.